I get shit done, I have fun. It's my time and I'm the one. I'm breaking through.
Vision casting, overcome obstacles and make your dreams a reality. Is that even possible? Well, hang out with us for the next 30 minutes or so and find out for yourself. In the meantime, here's a shameless plug for the great company that I'm part of. Welcome back, and thank you for being here. If you're here live today, appreciate you. We appreciate you if you're watching this on the replay. Just go hashtag replay and let us know that you're watching it. If you have a comment that you want to share with us, please do that. We're open to that because one of the ways to improve is to get feedback. So the feedback is welcome. Or if you've got an idea that you want to have discussed throughout the Business Renovator, we can help you with that because, as you saw, I'm part of the Focal Point organization, and we're a global entity with a variety of different coaches from a variety of different walks of life, and we specialize in helping people get more out of their business, more out of their life, and might be in the areas of time, team, money, or maybe an exit strategy. And exit doesn't necessarily mean leaving the business. It could be what's next, what are you going to add to it, are you going to franchise it? So if you have a question that you want to have addressed and want a complimentary coaching session, reach out to me. It's phil@coachphil.ca. That's the easiest way to find me. And if I'm not the guy, well, because I'm connected to that global community, there's somebody there that could probably help you out. In the meantime, I'm excited because you know that network I was telling you about? Well, one of them's going to be joining us today, and he's going to be talking with me about vision casting and overcoming obstacles and really making your dreams a reality. So he's a driven guy. He's passionate to assist others and make a difference. Being an entrepreneur and a certified business and executive coach and an area representative, which means he has a territory. He's growing a team of excellent coaches. So maybe one of them will be the ones you could ask the question to. So through his coaching, he inspires his clients to define and achieve their best visions for their professional success. He utilizes the same proven systems and programs that I do. And I can't wait any longer. We need to bring Marc Cody up.
Hey.
Good day, sir. Welcome.
Hey, great to see you today, Phil, and pleasure to be here with you. Glad to be able to engage in some conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to pulling out some nuggets of your greatness as this conversation evolves. So before you got into coaching, what were you doing?
Well, I don't want to go into all 30 plus years of it. Actually, one of the reasons it's really interesting that I got into coaching was probably my father. He was a second generation business owner, and it goes back a long way. When I was in junior high, he told me a story that when he turned 16, my grandfather, who was a bit of an entrepreneur, needed him to work in the family business. So in the 1950s, what do? You drop out of high school, you join the family business. But now suddenly 25 or 30 years later, I'm around, I'm in junior high, and my father shares with me that, you know what, the business has been good. He's been running it for a decade or two at that point, but there's so much more he probably could have done had he been trained, educated, or had a trusted business partner he could have relied on. So he's like, you know what, make sure you get a good foundation in business. And he would have supported me in whatever I chose to do, but business resonated with me, which is why I went to a business school. And then ultimately, you know what, did a number of different things with working with the big four firms and working with some large corporations and then working in some biotech space. But a few years ago, I decided, you know what, I could be that business partner that my dad mentioned he could really have used, you know what, decades ago. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but I think I could be that guy. It only took me about 35 or 40 years to get here. But that's one of the reasons I got into business coaching, is probably that seed that was planted really early on by my father.
So his legacy lives on. And it sounds like entrepreneurialism was genetic. It's in your
You know what?
DNA.
Yeah, my grandfather was quite an entrepreneur. I run into folks every now and then, or I used to, that said, you know what, he was quite a business guy, Mark. So apparently he was pretty shrewd. I didn't really get to know him that well because he passed away when I was pretty young.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel that it's probably somewhere inside of me.
So you reach out to the globe as I do, right? That's one of the things I like about the brand that we're in. We're not
Mhm.
restricted by the zip code or a postal code. Wherever
Yeah,
opportunity is, where our expertise could be appreciated, we're
mhm.
able to support people. Um,
Exactly right. It's actually one of the reasons I joined Focal Point as well. I spent most of my career working in and around the Boston area, and my wife grew up in New England as well. But she, after her son went off to college, and she spent a lot of lonely, quiet, cold winters in the New England area, she's like, I don't care for the cold anymore. So we bought a small place down in southern Florida, which I thought she'd maybe just go for a couple of months of the year. Well, that's turned into 8 months. So when I was looking to do something different about 5 or so years ago, I'm like, you know what? I want to be able to work from Boston and South Florida. And you know what? Focal Point has really enabled that. So we're not restricted by zip code in terms of, you know what, where we live, where we work, or potentially who we work with. So it's
yeah,
really a great, great thing.
yeah. And I speaks to my entrepreneurialness, and my rebelness of sorts, because
Uh-huh.
I don't like to be told what to do. Do you?
Uh, I don't think I'll ever have a corporate job again. That's not for me. I did that for plenty of years. It's a great place to start your career. You really learn a lot with these big corporations. But after a while, if you have that entrepreneurial spirit or some of that independence, that's why we go and we do what we do. And then we can help others be more successful as they plan out their futures as well.
Yeah, I know. It just
Mhm.
I like what you were talking about before we got started on the show, and the pre-show, and how adversity is a place to look for opportunity.
Mhm.
And in a great book by Napoleon Hill, he talks about, to every adversity, there's an equal or greater opportunity. And you did something. I don't know whether you was following that doctrine from that man, that book, or if you just knew because your DNA said where problems are, that's where entrepreneurs go to provide a solution to make life a little bit better for the people that you serve. Can you tell me, well, you've already told me, but could you tell the audience a little bit about it?
Yeah, well, what's interesting is I worked in the life sciences or biotech space for about the last 15 or so years. And Boston, Cambridge is really known for its life sciences ecosystem. And I was, you know, spending a lot of time networking, engaging with a variety of the organizations, the companies, the foundations in life sciences Boston. But we're here in early March 2022. And what's interesting is just yesterday, so March 10th, is when Boston shut down and sent people home. It's like, now what do we do? How do we
Right.
continue to engage? How do we continue to connect? So I wasn't necessarily thinking of Napoleon Hill, but I'm like, okay, how do we be creative and allow ourselves to be able to connect? Because there was so much bad news. People were quarantining. So I, reached out to probably 6, 8, 10, colleagues, friends, business associates, and contacts and said, folks, we're all quarantining. We're all in our homes. Why don't we get together for a beer, glass of wine, tea, whatever it is, on Thursday at 5 o'clock? And we'll invite others that are in our life sciences community to join us as well. And everybody will have a chance to introduce themselves, but we'll talk about some good news because Lord knows there was plenty of bad news out there. And then we'll talk about other questions that are on your mind. Next Thursday is going to be the second anniversary of what I call TTO, Thirsty Thursday Online. And it was interesting. Last night when we had the group, we had about 15 or so folks on, and I limit it to no more than 18 so we can really have some engaging conversations. And folks were so appreciative for this. I don't charge, I don't do it. I just do it to help enable the ecosystem. But in that group, people have, hired others, brought them onto their board of advisors, board of directors, recommended them for jobs, helped line up investments for them. So it's been a tremendously great ecosystem. And I thought that Thirsty Thursday would go for 2 or 3 months. Well, now we're into month 24 and going into month 25 in another week. So it's a way that you just take the adversity, figure it out, and go with it. And a few more points as well. But let's turn it back to you, Phil.
What I liked about hearing what you're saying there is you showed up You offered value. There was no pitching. It was an invitation to support and help people. So the entrepreneurial thing is where we show up and look for solutions to problems that are there. So you did that. You weren't expecting it to be a lottery win. You were just there to help out for a short period of time. And now you're on the anniversary of a couple of years out. Who would have thought? It's like throwing that pebble in the pond and the ripple effect happens. In that process, what I found to be true for me is that as we set a goal and move towards it, and looking at the title of our show, vision casting. So we cast into the vision, and then we overcome the obstacles that we may or may not have known that are going to show up, because we don't know what we don't know until we start moving towards it, right? Just like you talked about what you did with this community to help people out, and focusing on the good things, because the bad things are going to show up anyway. So I really liked what you're talking about. And I'm thinking those are some of the things that helped you and others turn their dreams into a reality.
Yeah. Just want to add one other point too, because that initial network I reached out to, they were more geographically centric around the Boston, Cambridge, biotech area. But now, Thirsty Thursday, we have folks from as far west as California to as far east as Switzerland and Sweden showing up. So had we been looking to do this in person, we would have never, had the breadth of reach and community that ultimately has resulted. And what's interesting is folks have said, yeah, COVID has been, terrible in terms of what it's done to families and, businesses and so forth. But this is a little bit of a silver lining from what really came from something that was really terrible. So it's actually a little bit of a benefit from a difficult situation.
Yeah, I totally get that. I had a similar kind of ripple effect. Like, I like hanging out with people. I'm not very much of an introvert. Well, maybe I am. No, I'm not.
No, probably not.
No, probably not. And I thought, well, at the same time, you were saying the world kind of shut down as we knew it. What the hell am I going to do? And I always had an idea or a vision to do something like I'm doing today, but not to the scope of what I'm doing. And I started in 2019, but I got frustrated and it was too expensive and all that kind of stuff. And then I got hanging out with some people just like you. I joined an organization on Facebook, of all places, and it was Emerging Sales, and it's Jeff Space. And I got to know him. I got his phone number. I've got books from him. We've had conversations. The people I've met through that. I've had people on the show from Belgium, from Australia, from Moscow, and other places. It's been amazing. And to be able to do something like that in where I live, that would have been so much more compressed, where the expanse and the genius and the power and the diversity of all of this is just amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's actually, as I said, a bit of that silver lining, because 2 years ago, who thought we would have been connecting, rapidly, globally, frequently with others from any geography or any area. But now with Zoom and other technologies, even like this, doesn't matter. I mean, you're up in Canada on the western side. I happen to be down in the southeast US right now. Doesn't matter, because we can still engage, have a great conversation, and potentially invite others to join us. And people are much more comfortable and familiar with this technology. But it's going to, be here for years to come, I think.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the new normal, because it's a really good example that we're, as a society, as a people, we evolve. And if you don't evolve, what ends up happening, right? I've just been doing a session based on some of the content that you and I support, teach and coach, and that is taking charge of your life. So this week's session to a client of mine, 6 different groups, I'm having that conversation with all of them. And it's interesting. They have not ever really thought of it in the way that we teach and coach that. And it's been a bit of an eye-opener with them. So next week, we're going to work on, now that they know taking responsibility for everything that shows up in your life, even though you didn't cause a pandemic, being responsible, being a victor, what can you do for it? So next week, for these guys and gals, we're going to be setting some goals, creating the vision that you're talking about, vision casting.
Yeah. No, what's really interesting, you talk about some of those folks, and I find this as well. My youngest client is 21 years old, and I've worked with folks as old as 80 years old, pretty widespread. And oftentimes what I find is people, even in their 40s, 50s, 60s, like, I don't quite know how I ended up here. It's like, I don't think I really planned out, where I was going to go. And I'm not sure this is necessarily where I want to be. So it's not necessarily that midlife crisis, but it's that realization where, you know what, there's more to life. So how do we help them? And one of the things that you and I do, as well as our other coaching colleagues, is really help those that we work with figure out what is right for them, and then ultimately put together that plan in order to get there. It's interesting. One of my newest clients is this 21-year-old that I mentioned. And his father was a bit of an entrepreneur and really embraced the concept of coaching. And he wanted his young son, who happens to be a really talented Division I golfer who's thinking about going to the PGA Tour, he wanted him to, you know what, think more thoughtfully about his future and his network and how he's showing up. So he retained me to work with his son, and it's been absolutely, you know what, wonderful for me, because this young gentleman now is, you know what, thinking thoughtfully about how does he show up? What are the values that he's going to embrace? You know, how does he want to engage with others? Folks at 21 aren't really thinking about that, but it's going to give him such a leg up because he's spending some time investing in himself now, and he's going to be much more thoughtful about where he goes and ultimately what he's able to achieve. So we can do some amazing things, which are really awesome.
Yeah, that is amazing. I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to ask you, what do you have a favorite client story? So that's one there. The youngest person that I can say I've officially worked with or had a conversation with, he's not been a paying client, but he's been a guest on my show. And when I met him when he was 12, and he had a birthday just before his it was coming on, so it was easier to say 12. I gave him a hard time. I said, no, now that you've turned 13, you can't come on the show. You're just too old. But he's not. But interesting young character. He's a YouTuber. He is an entrepreneur. And when he was on the show, I asked him about, you know, his dream, his goals, what's he aspiring to do immediately. And he's in the coaching space in a different organization with his dad. His goal is to help his dad get 50 people into their coaching program.
Wow.
I said, that's cool. What about for you? What else is, what's happening for you? And he says, well, I'd really like to get an ATV. So he lives up in Canada, about 30 minutes away from me in the foothills of the Rockies. And he said, I want an ATV because I like photography. And that's kind of what I do, is I tell people about it. And he says, I'm a reviewer of products from a kid's point of view. That's another thing he does. He gets paid to do some of that. And he says, well, I'd like an ATV. So I said, well, what would it look like? What brand would it be? What color? I asked all those questions. And he says, whoa, I haven't thought that far. And so by the end of the session, our call, it wasn't a coaching session. It was one of these, sorry, got carried away, lost my head. But he identified it and he painted a picture. And I think it was late December or early January on Facebook. He said, Phil, in the chat, I got my ATV. And his dad didn't buy it for him. He got it for himself. He made the money.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so important, to, as you said, to paint that picture of what the future could look like, right, Phil?
Absolutely.
Because oftentimes that's something much more tangible, and maybe it provides that emotional motivation or that subconscious motivation to work towards that as well. Because in many times, folks just don't do that, or they don't necessarily know how. But then we can, help them put the actions behind it, or at least plant the seed, which is what I always try to do. And I use, in many cases, although we talked about vision casting here, I really ask folks, what are your aspirations? Because sometimes a vision might be limited by reality, but aspirations, no limits thinking, what would you really love to see here? And I think it's a little bit broader. So I sometimes start with aspirations and then bring that down to the vision.
I don't sometimes, I always. Yeah. So one of the exercises I get them to do, and I said, well, if you were to write your story like a Stephen King novel, and it was going to be produced in, what's that?
That's kind of scary, isn't it?
Well, it can be, but The Green Mile wasn't scary. That was a brilliant one.
Right.
Right. And there were some good life lessons in there about negativity. Right. I really love that movie. And I also love it because it's one of the last movies I shared with my mom while she was still with us. And shortly after she passed away. But I still have fond memories about that. And what I liked about that movie is it pulled you in, and it was energetic, and it wasn't that scary. There were some little scary moments, but only for the bad people. What I like about that, though, is by doing what you're saying, what are you aspiring to be, do, and have? That's a fantasy. Absolutely is, because we're not there yet. And as we teach in the program, being responsible for, for your whole life.
Right.
The thing we talk about in there is the best in your life hasn't showed up yet. It's in the future. It's coming. So what does that look like? What does he want it to be? So I get my clients to write. I started out with a few paragraphs, and I thought, I experienced that that's not enough. So I get them to write a chapter. And I think if they could write a couple of chapters, to get the emotion. I said, anything goes. It's totally fantasy. So if you want to be a rich millionaire on an island, what does the island look like? Where's the island? What are you doing on the island? Why do you want all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Start to write it, and then we can reverse engineer what do we need to do over the next period of time to actually turn it into a reality. A real quick story is I did that with a client of mine that lived in just like your wife didn't like the frigidness living in Canada.
Yeah.
She was was a CPA. She kind of retired from that, and she was also a single mom raising her kids. And she wanted to spend half her time in a tropical place. So she had warm weather all the time, not just half the time.
Right.
So that was our big, hairy, audacious wish. And at the time she wanted to do, but she didn't think it was possible being female, being a mom, single mom, all running a business. Well, anyway, less than 10 months working with her, she moved to Mexico and has been living there ever since. Now it's full time. So anything's possible. Everything's not, right?
Exactly. It was interesting you mentioned that as well in terms of, creating some of that future. With one of my clients just this past week, we were reviewing what his goals were that we helped set or that we worked together literally just about a year ago. And we went through, and 3 out of the 4 goals that he set, he's already finished. I'm like, okay, good. Those are done. Now, what are we going to do next year? He's like, I never really realized that. I'm like, Mark, this is amazing. It's setting that vision, putting the plans together, and then enabling them to work towards it. They're not our goals; they're their goals.
Absolutely.
But why not get the best out of life? And by helping people to get there, it makes our roles really personally and professionally so rewarding.
So what is it that you really what am I trying to ask here? What is it that you really like about it? I mean, yes, you say it's rewarding, but what's the trigger that tells you that yes, this is so what is that for you?
In many cases, well, one, when my clients realize a certain degree of success and I see the gratification that they have, that means a tremendous amount to me. So just even seeing that. But then when they come back and they say, Mark, if I wasn't talking to you about this, or if we hadn't been doing this, I never would have achieved that. Well, who knows whether they would or wouldn't have. But the fact is that they are so appreciative, gives me a tremendous amount of gratification as well. There was one, a new client I was working with yesterday. Brilliant man. He's a scientist, PhD, C-level officer in an organization. He'd never been through our Trimetrics EQ assessment tool, which helps us assess DISC behavioral style and motivations. And we just had our first hour yesterday. And he's been an academic. He's been through the PhD program. He's like, Mark, this is one of the most valuable hours I've ever spent in my life. I'm like, holy cow. I'm like, awesome. That's great. So you know what? Let's get back to it again next week. So to help bring him up the learning curve, because he's now putting all the pieces together in terms of how enhanced self-awareness can make him be more effective. So just seeing people have these breakthroughs is, why I got into this business. We all talk about what our whys were. Mine is, to support, business leaders and executives to realize more success for themselves and their organizations.
And you almost like you're telling my reason why I do what I do. And whether I've coached athletes at the university level or young people over my years of being in the coaching space, the light bulb moment when they come alive and really step into themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what cranks me up. That's
Absolutely.
really what cranks me up.
Yeah, I have goosebumps right now just thinking about, the impact that you make or sometimes that I have on others. And this is why we do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it sounds like we live in this utopia and we don't have issues, challenges, and problems of our own. Would that be, that's not true, right? We have our own challenges, right?
Yeah. You know what? There was a book I read a number of years ago called The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster Ride. We're entrepreneurs, right? We don't just get a paycheck every single week. We have to, create our business, work with our clients, make sure that it's working. And it is a roller coaster ride. And my clients, many of them are entrepreneurs as well. I'm like, this is all part of the ride, but enjoy the highs and realize that the lows, they're just temporary too. If you think ahead, is this going to be that much in 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 years? Maybe not so much. So keep your eye on the road and just keep on moving forward.
And hire a coach. Doesn't have to be us, but I have a couple of coaches that support me in my own business and in my own life because I'm a human first. I'm a coach second. Yeah. And I have goals and aspirations. And, I guess it's like the cobbler or the mechanic. their children's shoes aren't as nice as their customers. If
Right.
we don't have somebody to help us, coach us, and be that voice of reason for us, not telling us what to do, but to be there as that support mechanism, that they hear what we're saying and where we're going off track based on what we've told them what we want, right?
Yeah. That coach, sometimes that the informal mentor, somebody who's maybe been there, an advisor of sorts, somebody that you can really connect with as well, who's really there, in your court. Sometimes, bosses, they maybe have, another motive because they want their employee to be most effective. So your needs may not always come up. Oftentimes these advisors, mentors, and absolutely coaches, you are the priority. So definitely try to get some of those folks around you or in your camp.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting close to the end here, and I wanted to share some
Wow.
stuff, but I know it goes so fast. And I want to share a couple of your websites. But before we do that, I'm going to do it now. Now, you say you're from the Boston area.
Yeah.
So here's my best. Do you have a smart car? I love that commercial. I don't know if the car's any good, but you guys don't talk.
Or do I say wicked a lot and park the car in Harvard Yard?
And go to the bar?
No,
But I love that commercial. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, and I forget the name of the actor. But when you see him interviewed, he talks just like you. But on that commercial, everybody turned it up 10x, right, and put on that crazy accent.
Yeah, they speak Boston, so it's definitely a different accent or a different language at times.
I have a nephew who he doesn't have the accent, but I won't get into his story, but it's a fascinating story on its own. And he actually went to Berkeley to study music. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but that's a story for another day. The focus is about you and business coaching and helping people out. So I'm going to share this site, and this is going to be your LinkedIn site first. As soon as there we go. So
it looks like me.
It looks like it's not an imposter, and it's got your name. So that's pretty cool. So if you wanted to get hold of Marc and talk to him about some of the things he's talked about, this is one way to go there. Let me find the other way to make it easier for people to see you. See this anyway, right there. LinkedIn.com/in/Marc-art. Or just search Marc Cody. That's what I did, and it showed up. Some great information there. I think you've got some feedback from other people that have engaged with you over the years, and it's a place to go and hang out.
Yeah, they're terrific, the folks I've worked with, so really enjoy it.
Some of the things you've written about, talked about, Focal Life Sci, CEO, Focal Point Executive Coaching, and Exploring Entrepreneurship. A couple of things that you're really stoked on.
That's kind of what I focus on. A lot of the life sciences industry, but working with those business leaders, executives, and even the up and comers. Sometimes those up and comers are tremendous fun because they embrace what we're working on so much and really make terrific progress.
I have an old banner in here, but I still think it's relevant. This is kind of what we were talking about. We help people and we get coaches to help us to stay in the victor space where we're proactive, take responsibility, we own things, we have a vision, and we strive for excellence. Versus the victim, what do? They blame, point fingers, make excuses, have a negative expectation or outcome. They deny, and they live in this place that I never want to live in, and that's scarcity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the other page that's interesting, let me go there. That's there. Now there's
I don't know how interesting that is, Phil.
Well, that says a leader of leaders, leader leading leaders. That's pretty interesting. So this is your website, and I'm going to bring that address up for people to see. It's right there.
Yeah, it looks like as well.
Is this the one where you have the video that they could get to hear you a little bit more if they wanted to find out more about you?
The LinkedIn is where I have a few of the videos posted.
Okay.
So I've done a couple of interviews there as well, similar to this, just to give a little perspective, little background, and some of the difference that we or even all of our colleagues can make as coaches. So I started this journey about 5 or so years ago, and I'm not turning back. This is what I'm continuing to do. This is who I am these days.
Awesome. Well, I'm grateful that you're on the show. It's that time. And I'm going to ask you if there's one thing that you could share with anybody who's watching this now or later in life, in the future, when it shows up in their screen. What would you tell them about an entrepreneurial or business owner, or just being a human and living a life of success?
I guess what I always ask my clients or folks maybe making a decision is, if you fast forward 3 to 5 years, if you don't make this decision or don't take this path, will you have any regrets? Because we want to live a life where we don't have regrets, right? So think about it that way, and have the courage to move forward and believe in yourself, and get some help around you if you need it as well, because you'll be amazed at what you can do and what you can achieve.
I love that. That's a perfect way to wrap this up. Thank you for being here, Marc. Thanks for your insight and inspiration. And I'll talk to you here in a sec.
This was great. Thanks, Phil. Really appreciate being here and having the conversation.
Awesome, man.
Yeah.
Wow, isn't that exciting? I thought it was good. I got inspired. A couple of questions are here. We're being thanked. Great advice. Thank you, Karen. And Roberto, thank you for being here. Much appreciated. It's that time where we're going to wrap up the show. And I want to remind you, this is what I would inspire or encourage you to be wonderful. You in wonderful is there on purpose. It's to remind you and me that we are unique and we're wonderful. So go out and act like that. And we'll catch you on another episode of The Business Renovator.
I get shit done, I have fun. It's my time and I'm the one. I'm breaking